Welcome on the Vintage Aviation News YouTube channel. This is another episode of Behind the Collection. Today we are in Charleston, South Carolina at Patriots Point, the Naval and Maritime Museum. And right behind me, the USS Yorktown CV-10, a very historic aircraft carrier. A beautiful day for a museum visit. We have lined up a couple of guests as usual that will interview for you guys. And as usual, I really appreciate your support. Please activate the little bell, subscribe to the channel for more aviation adventures like this one today. Again, thanks for watching. Very windy here today on the flight deck, so courtesy of the FA Crusader, we placed the camera inside the jet intake, so I hope the audio won't be disturbed by the wind. But anyway, the USS Yorktown, very historic aircraft carrier, CV-10 was the 10th aircraft carrier to serve in the United States Navy. Under construction as Bonhomme Richard, this new Essex class carrier was renamed in honor of the Yorktown CV-5, which was sunk in the epic Battle of Midway in June of 1942. This is a very historic ship, aircraft carrier, because it served in World War II, served at the end of Korea, although didn't see any action. Certainly served in Vietnam. And another interesting fact is that the ship also recovered the Apollo 8 astronauts capsule on December 1968. Yorktown was decommissioned in 1970 and placed in reserve. In 1975, the ship was towed to Bayonne, New Jersey, and then here to Charleston to become the centerpiece of the Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum. It's a fairly large boat for World War II. Was actually the first of the Essex class, was the first of its class as far as displacement. In fact, in 1943, this boat had 27,000 tons of displacement and 30,000 in 1956. Was long about 872 feet in 1943, and I was told it was bumped up to 888 in 1956. Pulled the cruise at the speed of 30 knots for about 14,000 nautical miles. Could carry about 90 aircraft in World War II, and had a pretty light armament as a protection of the ship. Anyway, it's one of the, I believe, 4 aircraft carrier museums in the United States. It's a great place to visit. In a day like today, really makes it worth it for the entire family to be here. Anyway, without further ado, let's go inside. We're gonna meet the curator. We're gonna meet a fantastic volunteer, Chris Ward, who was a U.S. Navy officer. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's go.
Hello and welcome aboard the USS Yorktown, housed here at Patriots Point in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. I'm Melissa Buchanan, the curator here at Patriots Point, and welcome aboard and come on inside and follow me. Welcome to the 80th anniversary exhibition, All Who Served Uniforms of World War II, here on the hangar deck of the USS Yorktown. So we're standing in our rotating exhibition space amongst quite a few uniforms and dresses from the World War II era, on loan to us from the Charleston Museum of the United States Marine Corps, the National Museum of the United States Army, as well as Joint Base Charleston. April 15th was the 80th anniversary of the commissioning of the USS Yorktown, so we opened this exhibition in honor and celebration and commemoration of that date. So we're going to have this open until July 16th, 2023, before we change up the space to a new exhibition in this area. So I have 2 favorite items in this exhibition space, one of which is a sea bag from Sergeant William Poole of the United States Marine Corps. He survived the sinking of the Yorktown CV-5, as did his sea bag. Unfortunately, we don't know how the sea bag survived, but it's quite special in that Sergeant Poole, and I do hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, K-U-H-L, wrote the names of his travels in the United States Marine Corps, on the bag, including all the ships that he was on, and even more specially, he had the Marines of the Yorktown CV-5 sign the bag originally, and then he circled the names of the men who did not get off the ship. So this is my other favorite item in the exhibition space, the D-Day dress. It was originally worn by Mercedes Marshall Blount. So it has a tag on the back of it from Bonwit Teller, but we don't know if this was a one-off or what happened, because the folks at the Charleston Museum haven't been able to find any other examples or advertising for it. But she was married to the president of a silk dyeing company here in town. So we're just wondering, maybe they had it made somehow, maybe with the help of Bonwit Teller. We just don't know. So welcome to the forecastle aboard the Yorktown. So as you can see, the anchor chains lying on the deck behind me. This is not a part of the ship that's normally open to visitors, but depending on certain things, it can be a part of our captain's tour that we offer several times a day. And welcome to the flight deck of the USS Yorktown, where you will find the best views of Charleston, as well as many of our aircraft, several of which are currently being repainted right now. And we're working on some of that restoration process for those aircraft. So welcome to the outer area of our engine room exhibit, where we're kind of giving you a choice, letting you learn what the engine room is without having to go down a very steep ladder that even I don't like doing.
Hi, my name is Chris Ward. I'm retired Navy commander. I served from 1982 to 2006. And I had a wonderful experience in the Navy, did all kinds of things. I'm sitting on the USS Yorktown, which is an aircraft carrier that decommissioned long before I went in 1982. But I volunteer down here every Friday afternoon from 3 to 6, and it's just a wonderful way to end my week. So just a little bit about what I did in the Navy. When I went in 1982, women hardly had any role in the military at the time. My recruiter told me that I would never ever set foot on a ship and I would never get to sea. I went in anyway, and I spent the first 2 years of my Navy career at sea. So I'm glad I didn't listen to her. I wound up going out to Fleet Training Group Western Pacific out there in Japan, and I spent all my time on the forward deployed ships doing training with the enlisted. We would take an enlisted crew on. I would bring boiler techs on to do damage control training or engine training. I would bring hull technicians on to do damage control training, all different types of training, electronics training, operations training. It was a great orientation for the first 2 years for a brand new ensign, and I loved living in Japan. I spent most of my career working in technology areas. When I was young, I had an engineering degree, and I was somewhat of a geek before a geek was fashionable in any manner, shape, or form. So there was no chance I was ever going to get a full career and get a promotion as a geek back in 1982. But as time went on, it became a really hot field. So in 1997, the Navy started making a new community called Information Professionals. So the Information Professionals is the community of communicators, technicians, the cyber force, the cybersecurity folks. And I was able to be one of the first people to go into that community. It was a great community. We did a ton of fabulous things. I got to spend a lot of time, again, at sea on the USS Blue Ridge out there in 7th Fleet, back in Japan again. And I finished up out in Japan as the chief staff for technology, command and control for all of the forward deployed forces. So my last 3 years, I would say, were probably my favorite. I got to fly all over the place, from Guam to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, all through Korea, all through Japan, Singapore and Hong Kong, establishing communication detachments, upgrading the infrastructure. Got to spend some good amount of time out on the Blue Ridge, and mostly my favorite part, working with the Japanese. So when I retired in 2006, I immediately got hired by companies that work with Japanese industry, and I still do that to this day. I am happy to say I get to work with the Japanese people, which is our strongest ally out there in that region of the Pacific, and they are a delight to work with. It's been a lot of fun. So when I moved here in 2006, I worked from home before working from home was a thing. And all of my coworkers who are on the other side of an airplane or the other side of a WebEx meeting or a phone call. I didn't really have a local community. And I thought it would be fun to volunteer or to get involved with something a little bit more local. And I had an opportunity to come down and work on Patriots Point. There are so many things that this museum ship does. It is so embedded in our community. There's so many ways to engage. The way I first started engaging was with the 5th grade classes. So throughout this region of South Carolina, every 5th grader is funded to come in on a bus and spend half a day on the museum ship and learn about the history of World War II. And they needed a constant stream of people that could come down and lead these little groups on. And you could sign up for whatever hours you wanted. So I started by just signing up for a period to come down and take one of the classes, and I could, sign up for one on Wednesday morning or one on Thursday afternoon. Since I could pick it, I could work my work schedule around it, and I found it's just a lot of fun. About that time, they needed desperate help working in the evenings with the campers. So you may not realize this, but we have between 300 and 600 overnight guests on this ship. And these kids, mostly from Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, or school groups, will come down in their groups. They'll bring sleeping bags and their backpacks and everything, and they'll spend the entire weekend. And I had a blast working with that. And I found that that was the funnest thing to do. I could work all day on my computer job, come down here and just run around with the little kids and everything. My children are grown and up and out, and it was really filling a niche for me. Would spend every Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night down here from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. and that was a really fun experience for me. In comes COVID, and all of that stopped. At that point, I dropped back, and now I'm just doing the volunteer on Friday afternoon. Camping program is still going strong. I help out from time to time, but I've discovered I really enjoy my Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights to myself. So I don't do quite as much of that. Fun fact about this ship, they started to build it in Newport News, Virginia, in the shipyard. They lay the keel, that's the first part, December 1st, 1941. It was going to be called the USS Bonhomme Richard, named after a Revolutionary hero. So 6 days later, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and any man that was not already in the military went down and signed up, and off they went. So it turns out 70%, that's 70% of the workforce that got this ship out into the ocean was female. I love that, being a female Navy person myself. Took them 15 months to get this ship out. Nowadays it takes us 5 years. 15 months later, they put it in the water, they do their sea trials, they take it out and do all their testing with it, make sure it's ready to go. And then how many women were on board? 0. It went through the Panama Canal, went out and did the island hopping back through the Pacific. If you think of World War II, it was island by island by island that the Japanese advanced. As the ship is coming back, they have Marcus Island, they wound up off of the Philippines, they wound up off of Okinawa, and then this ship was there all the way to the very end of World War II. In fact, it was off of Tokyo during the surrender. So the surrender happened on September 2nd of 1945 on board the USS Missouri, which was in Tokyo Harbor. But this ship was offshore, and the airplanes on this ship were flying on a combat air patrol over the city, just in case anything went weird. At the end of World War II, when the surrender was done, they took all the airplanes off. And if you'll notice down on the hangar deck, those little dots all the way around the deck, those are weld marks where they put in over 1,000 bunks, cots, welded right into the deck, because this ship went back and forth across the Pacific a dozen times, taking back sailors, soldiers, Marines, airmen that had been wounded, prisoners of war, or just folks coming home from their service overseas. They called it the Magic Carpet Ride. And if you think about when you're down there, all those people coming home finally. At the end of World War II, it went into the yards, got refitted. It did miss most of the Korean War. Came out at the end of that with a new mission of being able to track submarines. So a little bit of extra equipment came on board. They had transitioned to jets, which required some changes on the flight deck. That angled flight deck was put in, and it went out and it was off of Vietnam throughout the entire Vietnam War. It continued to serve all the way until early 1970s. The last thing it did was it picked up the Apollo 8 capsule 500 miles south of Hawaii. So if you probably can't remember back that far, but what it was putting men in and orbiting the moon. And it was a big deal. There were 3 astronauts on it. It splashed down into the ocean 500 miles south of Hawaii. The Yorktown was there. They sent the helicopter over, brought the astronauts off. They came alongside, picked up the Apollo capsule, brought it on board the deck, and then that was the last mission of the ship. So from World War II to the space age. At that point, it went to Hollywood and did a 6-month stint in Hollywood as a backdrop for some movies. The worst sci-fi movie on the planet Earth, The Philadelphia Experiment, don't bother. But the best World War II movie, which is Tora Tora Tora, this is dressed up as the aircraft carrier that the Japanese were on, so fabulous. And then directly after that, it came in here as a museum ship where it's been ever since. All right, it sounds obvious, but an aircraft carrier, what is its purpose? Its purpose is to get airplanes up in the air. So everything is geared about getting those airplanes out. That's why all the Navy planes, their wings fold up, they cram them in there down below as tight as they can be, and then when they need to put them up, there's many different types of airplanes, but there's basically, in World War II, 4 different types that would have been on this ship. There would be the fighter planes, which are the lighter weight ones. Then there would be the torpedo planes, which are a little bit heavier. Then the bombers, which would be much heavier, and then a couple of different scout planes. But when you go up and you look at a typical mission, especially back in World War II, they had to start in this ready room, sitting here, getting briefed, and they had to know exactly where they were going. They didn't have a Google map with a blue dot on it. They couldn't go back and call home and say, where am I? They had to pay attention to make sure they knew where they were going and what the target was. Once they finished with the target, they had to find the ship again. And it sounds obvious, but it's not, all right? If the ship is trying to be quiet and stealthy, it's not emitting too much of a signal, so they have to know how to sweep the area. So each different person in this board is listing the names of people, and it gives them which aircraft they're going to be, what their call sign is, and what time they're supposed to be. What this one is going to strike Guam. This is going to be a combat air patrol. So they'll all have different missions. When they're all done, they have to find the ship again. So their life depends on it. If they don't find the ship, you don't hear from them again. You don't know whether they were shot down, whether they lost at sea, or what happened. But a lot of reasons why that's hard. Maybe the ship isn't in the location it was supposed to be. It had to maneuver. Maybe the ship has gone silent. Maybe the weather conditions are bad. So getting back to that ship really counts on making sure you know everything about the mission from the beginning to the end. All right, I'm going to take you down and show you some of the places where I would have worked if I was a sailor on this ship. Obviously, this ship predates me. I'm not that old, but I will show you the kind of things that I used to do when I was on active duty. So follow me. This is one of the many radio rooms, and if you look in there, you'll see there's a sailor in there, and he's working with all the equipment that's bringing in all the signals that come in. Without this equipment, the ship is blind and it cannot communicate. We take it for granted now that you can tell anybody or talk to anybody at any time. This was a big deal. In World War II, it was very primitive. It was, and it came a long way by the time I went in, but this is one of the early radio rooms. This is the Combat Information Command, or Combat Information Center, CIC of the ship. The reason the red lights are there is because we want to keep your vision good so that you can peer into these radar scopes. When this ship was first built, radar was already in existence. Back in the 1930s is when radar was being developed. But when this ship came out, radar was really very new. This ship was one of the first ships that had multiple different types of radar. So if you think of a radar, it's a sound that goes out and hits something, bounces back. If it doesn't bounce back, it means there was nothing there, okay? All of these different radar repeaters here are looking at different tunings of the radar devices. So some of them are set to be air search, some of them are set to be surface search, some of them are set somewhere in between. And so if you can have a really good picture of what's on the surface, maybe you can say that there's a ship or an island or some rocks or whatever. In the air, you might be able to say there's airplanes coming in. There's a different wavelength you would want to use to look at weather. All of those things were in existence before World War II, but fusing them together was what was really hard. And this is the first ship that actually did that successfully. It was credited really early on with being able to work in Combat Information Center to fuse all this equipment together to get a good common operational picture of what it looked like out there.
So Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum is actually an agency of the state of South Carolina. Unfortunately, we do not receive state or federal funding, so every dollar that our visitors spend getting tickets, buying a Coke here, helps to support the museum and her mission. At Patriots Point, we are always open to our visitors, 364 days a year just about, whether they be with our overnight camping program, the school groups that come, particularly with Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester counties, or the rest of South Carolina. If you'd like to lend us your support, please visit us at patriotspoint.org. There'll be a link to the USS Yorktown Foundation.
Well, this concludes our visit to the USS Yorktown here in Charleston, South Carolina. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as usual, subscribe to the channel, activate the little bell so you'll be notified every time we go live. And as always, thanks for your support and thanks for watching.